All right, waiting for people to join. Hi, everyone. All right, I think here we are. Hi, everybody. My name is Noam. I am a developer relations engineer at Interchain. Thank you so much for joining. This workshop is, trying to help you out, especially newcomers to the ecosystem, newcomers to Starport. I'm trying to basically get you started to build your own blockchain. Let me just give a little intro about myself and what this thing about the developer portal is. I'm pretty new to Interchain. I've been here for a couple months, and I am working on a couple projects like the groups module, user interface. I'm working on a multi-sig user interface. I'm most importantly right now, what I'm here to present is actually the developer portal that we have been building together with B9 Labs. It's a great portal, and it looks like this. Basically, what we've noticed is that, there's a lot of tutorials here and there everywhere, but there isn't really a linear curve to get started with. Yeah, thanks for the comment on the hair. There isn't really a linear curve on how to get started from nowhere. Generally, you would have to sort of like find a little tutorial here, a little tutorial there, and they're not really connected to each other, and they're not really leading you on one big journey. And so that's what we tried to solve with the developer portal. So before we get started, if you want to, so let me make it very clear. This is actually just intended for people who probably are new to Starport and new to building their own blockchain. If you're a pro, great, stick around, maybe answer some questions that I can't answer perhaps. But if you're new, it would be great if you can get started with us. Let me just send the link here in the chat. And actually, I should have prepared this link, but obviously, here we are. There you go. So if you want to join, you should probably already go ahead and install Starport using these instructions. And then I'll give a little intro on the actual academy itself while you guys get set up with the Starport itself. So the developer portal, the main part of that is the Cosmos Academy, which I'll go into. The tutorials are there. We still have these separate tutorials. You can still find them here. There are some articles, and most importantly, also there are some resources here. So if you want to learn more about the Cosmos SDK, Tendermint Core, IBC, Starport, all the other things, this is your central point of finding all these things. We're looking to expand this in the future. What you're looking at right now is actually a beta that we've launched just for the HackAtom. And so I'm here to show you. And we're going to focus on the Cosmos Academy. And the Cosmos Academy consists of 5 different modules. And basically, we just explained to you what's Cosmos, what is blockchain, all that kind of stuff. Main concepts is the big chunk of a lot of in-depth text about how accounts work, how transactions work, protobuf, multi-store, keepers, base app, queries, everything that makes up the SDK. We go into great detail. So if you want to know everything about the SDK, then this is where you start. It's a lot of material, but it's great stuff. It also contains some sort of like pseudocode about how to make your own chain. But if you want to dive straight into building your own chain, which is what we're going to be doing, you start here, my own Cosmos chain. So we're going to start with installing Starport. I already did this. Is anyone here coding along, and have they tried installing Starport so far already? Does anyone here have? Yep, that's cool, Thomas. Awesome. So you guys have Starport already set up, no problem there? Awesome. Of course it worked like a charm. AIB built it. It's good. All right, let me see. Exactly. I have also an overview here that I lost on my screen of where I am. Boom, 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 boom. All right, cool. So let me explain to you what we're actually going to be doing. We're going to be building a checkers game. A checkers game, the game with just where you go diagonally, and it's a very simple game. The end goal here would be a game where you can play with other players. You can use IBC to transfer tokens like Atom from the hub to your own chain to use as a wager for this game. So the nice thing is that when you use Starport, what you get for free is you get the banking module, you get it for free. You get government module for free. You get staking for free. You get IBC for free. You get basically everything that you need to just launch your successful chain. You get it for free, and Starport just sets it up for you. The only thing that we really need to do is build a module specifically for the checkers game. Anything else is just taken care of for you. And ordinarily, before Starport, what you would have to do is you would have to dig into the code and basically make a lot of boilerplate, a lot of code that is just copy paste from the other modules, and you would have to copy all that code all the time, and then yeah, it's just a lot of work. So with Starport, we can do that a lot easier. We can just give it an instruction to, for example, create a variable for you that you can change, create a message that you can send a transaction to your chain, create queries very easily. It does all that work for you. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so let me see if I can get to this page again. Here we are. So I have Starport already installed. I hope everyone is at version, I think it's 18.5 now, actually. Let me have a look. We're going to be going into our own little chain here. Let's see. I already have installed. So let's just start scaffolding our chain. We'll call it checkers, and we'll just put it into Alice namespace. And here we go. 18.6 already. I think that got released today. I'm not sure, but that's great. Anyway, that's fine. We're just going to wait until it scaffolds. And we can actually look at the code later and see what is sort of generated. This takes a little while. This is fine. Has anyone run into any problems yet? I don't think so, right? This is all pretty straightforward. Maybe in this meanwhile, I can answer some questions. Do you provide mentor? Do you mean like mentorship, Gervais? Because I don't think we do, but we are looking into maybe providing some kind of a course actually in the future. We're still talking about this with B9 Lab. They would probably be providing this content, but we're looking into maybe setting up some courses that are mentored courses that, you know, you could sort of like, you have to be selected for that, but like that would be a really cool thing. We're looking into capacity right now. This is something that we can really do. But when this actually happens, of course, everyone will be informed about this. So that I think would be a great opportunity, especially for people here in the Hackathon building things who want to continue working on projects in the future. I think this would be a great opportunity. But that's to be determined. Okay, here we go. We have successfully created a new blockchain. So now let's have a look at actually what has been done. And I'm going to answer also this question: how much Golang knowledge is required to build a chain using Starport? Very little. It depends on how custom you want to do it. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't actually know Golang that much. So I'm learning it through all this. And this is, for me, the best way to, you know, to get started on it. And then if you want to learn more, you can learn more. But the actual complexity of the code is actually very little, especially due to the help of Starport. So that's great. So for example, here we have our checkers folder, and that's generated mostly by Starport. So what Starport does, it has a copy of the SDK. It just basically builds that for you and sets it up with the parameters that you gave it. And what we told it, was create a new blockchain called checkers. That's really all that we told it. So it understands that we need an extra module that's called checkers. Now let's have a look at that. Under client, we should have now txgo. That's just a random file that was generated. Well, not random, it's very specific, but it was generated by Starport. And for example, what you'll see in lots of the files here actually is that there is a line that says this line is used by Starport scaffolding #1. And these lines, don't mess with them. Keep them there, because this is the way that Starport knows, oh, here's where I need to inject code when you tell Starport to create a message or to create this particular variable or this particular map. So keep all these things there. So let's actually start running the chain. And we do that by, you know, first of all, going to folder, and then we say Starport serve. And of course, Starport chain serve, my bad. What it's doing now, basically, it's just building everything that we need to build. So it's checking the dependencies, make sure that you everything have, and basically it just generates everything. It starts building the binary for you, compiles it, Also creates 2 accounts for you, usually called Alice and Bob. We'll see that later. So that you have some accounts to play with, have staking. It sets up a node for you so that you can actually interact with your chain. It sets up your validator, basically, so your chain is running. You could even get it to set up a relayer between a different chain, but we're not quite there yet. What else am I missing? Yeah, that's generally what it sets up and what we're going to be doing. So here we go. We have our account here. We have Alice with this address that was created with this mnemonic. And then we have another account called Bob that was created with this address and this mnemonic. And, we now also have our node running and we have our API running. And let's actually look at our API. So let's just copy this URL and open it in our browser. Had it open already. Look at that. That is now a API that we can interact with. So for example, this is a query. Cosmos asked the bank module about the balance of which address. Well, let's try out the address of Alice. So we copy this Cosmos address, for example, it out. We import it here in the address, and then we say execute. And what do we get? A response. We have about 100 million stake, so we're rich. That's great. And we have 20,000 token, whatever that is. So that's great. So this seems to be running. It seems to be working. And there's even something better that we can do. We can also create a front end for our application, so we can actually send transactions without having to use the command line interface. For that, let's create a new screen here. And this is all, I'm just following the tutorial right now and the Starport page that I sent you all on. So everyone should be able to do this. I'm now at the CD view part. So CD, let's go to CD code, CD checkers. Actually, we go to view. So view is actually ViewPress. That's the ViewPress is actually the sort of like framework that we use for the user interface. So we can actually run that. So when we go here, we do npm install. What it does, it checks for a JSON file there called package.json. And so it understands which dependencies it needs to install. So it does that right now. And while it does that, maybe I can answer this question. Scaffold command failed. Apparently few packages were not in the Go root. Yeah, so how to set up you have to set up your source file, your dot profile file to make sure your variables and your binaries are set correctly. I can't troubleshoot that for you right now. I think maybe somebody else in the chat can. There's probably a very good link on that online. But that's something you want to go and check out. All right, cool. Thanks. Well, here we are. We have installed the npm package for our ViewPress, and now we want to actually serve it so that we have a front end. So let's see how that goes. Should be working. I tested this morning. You never know how it is. Also, you might be hearing my bell because I'm getting packages that I'm missing out now. Should be getting a new laptop actually. So let's have a look. Yeah, this is going to take a little while actually, but let's see. Yeah, it's not done yet. Okay, all good. We'll be able to review this video later. I actually don't know. Maybe Sonia or Vale are here to answer this question. I'm not sure if this is being recorded, but it would be nice, right? Let's see. All right, so we're going to skip the rest of the Starport part itself because this just basically goes over, how to build a. Oh, here we go. Here's a front end. This goes over how to build a message called create post. So let's look at the actual page here. It's like this kind of stuff, Starport message create post. This is just for you to sort of like play around. This isn't actually related to the checkers game yet, so we can skip this. The only thing that really mattered here is that we created the created our ViewPress and then started serving that and started launching that server so that we can interact with our user interface. The session is recorded. Great. So this is the user interface that's just generated. If you go to localhost and then port 8080, you go here and you get to this beautiful page that's basically given to you for free, and that runs on the background because you've been running the ViewPress server basically. And what we can do here is we can take our mnemonic from Alice. Let's just copy that. And we go back here. I already have an old one. Actually, that should be removed. So you know what? Let's go with Bob. New wallet, import existing wallet. We just copy paste the mnemonic. We call it Bob. Password something stupid. Although you should ordinarily not have something stupid. Wow, I can't even get the same password here. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Okay, so here we go, Bob. Bob has, in fact, 100 million stake, 10,000 token. So how do we know if our chain is actually running, right? We can send each other a token. So let's look at Alice's address right here. We copy and pasted that, enter that in the recipient address, and let's send Alice. We had a great dinner together, but you know we're going Dutch, so we're splitting the bill. And I will send her 100 stake. There you go. My stake has gone down. There was a new transaction created, and it was sent to this address, minus 100 stake. If we were to now import Alice's wallet, go. I'll call her actually Alice. Then we see that actually Alice has now 100 million and 100 stakes. So this is working. Our chain is actually running. We can send tokens. We can use, you know, our wallets. We can interact. There we go. We have an API. We can query balances. We have a chain. It's great. Now, what do? We're going to start actually building our checkers game. This is a bit more specific. But before we do that, maybe you can answer some questions. Which command you use to fire the front end? So let me show you. On this startup, the Startport install page, basically, after you've served your chain, there's another part that you can do when you have to go into the view folder and then install npm, which uses a package.json file to install the dependencies, and then you serve it. And then after that, you can navigate to localhost 8080, and then your front end should be running. Did anyone succeed in this or fail in this or had any problems there or need any help on this part? I'll take that as a sign. Oh, throw an error, Karen. Maybe you can tell me what's going on. Invalid options in view.config.js child. That is a very strange error that I have never seen before. Let's see. Sometimes you do get some warnings, but you shouldn't get an error. Are you sure that Startport is set to 18.5? So if you open a new, okay, cool. That's a tough one. Yeah, it's also not very Startport specific because the ViewPress stuff, it's just installing a bunch of packages. Could be that you might have some installed somewhere in the past that might interfere with that. If anyone else has any suggestions there, that would be great because I actually don't know what would be causing this. Yeah. Sorry, I can't give you a concrete answer, but the benefit is here, the dashboard is inactive. Okay, well, so the benefit is we're not actually going to be using dashboard that much. So that's great. What you're saying, it's inactive after logging in as Alice. What do you mean with inactive? The page doesn't like run anymore? Or do you get a specific error, Thomas? Well, let's not focus on the dashboard too much. No input in the recipient address. No input. Oh, so you can't actually do anything here, basically. Okay, just make sure that, you know, for example, here I have a lock, basically. Make sure that it's unlocked. Could be that that's it. Otherwise, we can save that maybe for the Startport Discord, because that's a great place to answer these kind of questions. I want to move on a little bit so we actually go into building the module, which is a bit more important than the user interface. But generally, this should work, and we'll have a user interface to interact. Well, exactly, cool. So we're going to go to the Make a Checkers blockchain and go back to our, well, actually, I have a different screen where I open this up as well. So we don't actually right now have to download the rules for the checkers game and all that stuff. We're just going to create the game itself. So what do we need to store a game? So let's say you and me, we want to play a game of checkers. So we need to know, who's the red player, who's the black player, or white or black player, whatever colors we're using really. We need to know whose turn it is, and we need to know the game ID. So that means this information needs to be stored somewhere, right? So how are we going to store this? We can actually just use a very simple command for this. But what we need to know first is, what is the current, how do we know what the current game identifier is? We need to think about that, right? So we can't just take a random number because it might conflict with another person. Plus, random is pretty hard to do on a blockchain, especially if you want to have a deterministic blockchain, right? So you can't let the player pick it, because at that point you would also have a problem, because you might have the same game idea. So we need to make sure that the blockchain itself decides what game it is. So how do we know to not interact? We can just have one number go up, basically. In every new game, that number just keeps going up. So let's start with that first. And for that, we will need, we just minimize it. We will need another little window here. And we will go to our little checkers game. Because keep in mind, this thing it's running the actual blockchain. So you can't do anything. You just keep this running. And here we are with checkers. We have a new screen here, and we can run this. And let me explain to you what this does. This Startport, it scaffolds a single variable called next game, and we're going to call it, inside a struct called next game, and it's called ID value. Basically, this is just what we're using to identify like what game number do we have right now, and we're going to run it. It's going to take a little while, and what you see in the other screen at that point is that it starts rebuilding and serving again your chain. And while this is scaffolding, this takes a little while, and every time you make a new scaffold, this is going to take a little while, but your chain just keeps, shuts down, it rebuilds, and then it starts up again. So you're like live editing, basically. You're doing like, you could technically just build in production. This is basically still a test net, right? But it just keeps running. This is a great feature. So while this is running, we also have another command that we want to use. But let me just explain to you this command a little bit. So I already said we're scaffolding a variable called ID value in the module checkers. And then there's this part here that says no message. And why do we say no message? It's because we don't actually want anyone to be able to interact with this variable. We only want the chain to say, hey, this variable goes up every time a new game is created. It's the game identifier. Because if we allow other people to interact with that, that's what a message would do. A message is just like a way of saying like a transaction. So that's why we say no message. And this means that Startport doesn't create the scaffolding basically for these messages for us, because we don't actually want to interact like that. So anyway, next game was added in an emoji. That's, it's very good that we get these emojis. It makes me feel happy. Oh, why did I do that? So let's now also create the game itself. Oh, I did something bad. Can't be used as a file name created as used. Oh, right, this is my bad. I'm using a new version. There you go. So let's have a look at that. I ran this. We're going to scaffold not a single value right now. We're going to scaffold a map. And a map is basically something. It's just a list of objects, and these objects, we call them stored game. And those stored games objects contain a couple variables called game, which is the game identifier, the turn, whose turn it is. Yeah, exactly. Short for mapping. That's right. The red player and the black player. And automatically it also creates the creator, the person who created this this stored game object. Again, it's a scaffolding, and we can actually already probably start looking at the code that is generated. So let's have a look here. So what happened just now? If we go to our proto folder, we will see a few files that have been created here. Nextgame.proto and storedgame.proto. And protobuf is basically, that's proto short for protobuf, is basically, in this case, like an instruction for you on, especially for the SDK, it's an instruction on what is contained in this sort of object, and in what order should we, serialize this. Serialize meaning that in case we want to transfer data or package it in some way, serializing is knowing, understanding like, okay, the index goes first, the game goes second, turn third. We need to do this because if we don't, it might be a bit difficult if we're using multiple computers at the same time running our chain to understand how things are packaged. So this is what protobuf is generally used for, and we use it in this case so that we can scaffold the rest of our objects, basically. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But these are the main things that are generated. And we also have a Genesis proto, which basically tells us a little bit like what to do when we, launch our chain, what kind of storage is set up. This doesn't actually tell us anything. This just gives us the framework so that our chain understands what to do at Genesis. And that's all the work that Startport does in the background, and the SDK does that in the background. We don't actually have to worry about this. Any of this code that we're looking at right now, it's just we're looking at it. We don't have to actually change anything. The cool thing here is the thing that we'll actually start interacting with, and I can show you. I'll show you at least like how that would look. Is that we have queries built up also with as a proto file. And so we got 3 queries that are created actually. We have a next game query that returns us, the next game query response, and a stored game, which you can either get by index or you can get it by as a list. This is because it was a map or a mapping. So when you have a map or a list of objects, you want to be able to say, hey, give me object number 15, but you also want to be able to say, hey, give me a list of objects. Give me all of them, for example. And so Startport understands that because it was a mapping, and the SDK then generates, and Startport generates 2 queries because you want to get it by index and item, but it understands when you're just getting the next game value, that's just one variable. So yeah, so it's very context aware, and that's really useful. That means that we don't really have to do much. Anyway, let's have a look at, there's one cool thing here now. When we have our API here, we should have our queries here, but we don't, unless I got that wrong. Maybe it's in the second stage, actually. Ordinarily, these would show up here. So let me see if I got that right. That's okay, though. We'll move on. Yeah, so what you would do ordinarily, we would want to maybe like actually query those. But we can't because we haven't actually created any games. So let's move on to that part, that we actually can create games, or at least start with creating some games. Has anyone understood what I've been saying so far? Is it too easy? Is it too complicated? Is anyone running into any issues? This is also my first time running a workshop, just so you know. Bear with me. Yeah, so far so good, I hope. All right, good to know. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Cool. Hey, so we're gonna create a game message. So we're just gonna go to the second page of the Startport of the developer portal. Create a game message, and when you're done with this, go over this, read it. Actually, there's a lot more details in terms of like what it all means, and also if you really want to understand like what are these messages, what is protobuf, etc. These are all under the main concepts, right? So this is like, if you want to know what protobuf really is, or what a message really is, or how queries are done, it's all here, and it's super detailed. And it also, I'll just show you actually quickly. For example, with protobuf. It's a long ass text. And then here's show me some codes for my Checkers blockchain. This is just some code examples. You don't actually need to use this, but it puts it into the context of the Checkers game. So anything that you're reading on this module, basically, it's all related to this Checkers game. Anyway, we're going back to create a game message. And let me also get my notes here. Where are we? Yes. Hey, so now that we have the storage figured out, we know exactly what to store. We need to also make sure that we have a message so that we can create a new game. And a message is just like a transaction that we send to the chain. We need to understand like what kind of input do we need in that message? Well, we need to know who's the red player and we need to know who's the black player. What we don't need is we don't need to know who the creator is, because the creator is the person who signs the message. So we already have this. We can just read that. And the game ID, we don't need that as an input either, because we can just take it from the chain itself, because we have this variable called next game. We have to give an output on that message as well. We probably want to return the ID of the game. We can call that ID value so that we know what the number is of that game. So if in the future we want to play that game again, we're like, oh yeah, that was game 15. Let me go ahead and continue playing that game. So for that, we can just take this particular instruction, and let me just get this other one open again. Starport scaffold, this time a message. It's going to be called create game. It takes the input red and the input black. It's connected to the module checkers, and its response is going to be a variable called ID value. And there we go. This again takes a little time. And after that, when it's done, we're going to be looking at some of the protobuf objects that are created, and also look at the transaction of proto, because this message is actually a transaction. We've got to wait a few minutes. So if anyone had any questions at this point, feel free. I'm running out of water. At least I got my Fanta, or whatever it is in Germany. Well, let's see. Maybe the code's already there. Look at that. So this TX proto file is actually a proto that would like handle any sort of messages. So far it was empty because we hadn't actually created any messages. Remember, we had this flag of like no message. It's because we didn't want people to interact with that data that we stored. Now we definitely want to interact, with this, function to create a game. So it creates a message, creates like a transaction, and it calls it, it's a service basically, and it calls it create game, and it returns message create game response. Well, as far as I am aware, we can also look at this somewhere else. Let me have a look. Here we go. No, not this one. Message create game. Yeah, so here you go. It creates all this like extra code here under the types. For example, it creates the actual function that takes, a creator string. It automatically knows. IBC is not part of this workshop, unfortunately. I would like to. Maybe I can show you something, but I can't actually run it for you. That's going to be taking a little bit too much time. But for this message create game, we take a string creator, another string red, black, and we return something. And all this stuff is just being built for you. You don't actually have to do much here. So at this point, if it's done, it's almost done. Building the blockchain. One day. Probably not running as well now. Is this running? Let's just wait a few more minutes. Yeah, it should be running now. And look at that. We have a bunch of queries here now. We have a query to check what the value is of the next game. We could probably try it. Try it out. Execute. Right. This is probably because we haven't actually set up anything yet. We haven't created any games. We haven't done anything. So this variable isn't really set up yet. So that's the problem, right? We can't actually query anything right now because we haven't actually created any games. And we have created now a create game message, but we haven't actually provided the code of like what to do exactly. This is something for later. Actually, I was planning, this was supposed to be already about 45 minutes. So I'm going a little faster than I initially intended to go. Let me see if I had something else. Yeah, so we can't actually run the create game function yet. So that's that. So I'll just go over a little bit in terms of like what you will be learning in the rest of the game. And I'll include a little bit of this IBC part. CosmWasm should be actually in the bottom of the page, so we'll fix that real soon. After this, you would have to create the game handling. And basically what this does, it creates, actually helps you create the brand new game, saves it in storage, return the ID of the new game. This is the actual handling of that message that we just created. It's not that much work. but we need to import the rules of the game basically at that point. So there's a little bit more. We need to download some stuff. And then we handle the playing. We add events. Events are basically objects that when something happens. So for example, create a game. You create also an event that says a game was created, so that if you want to create a user interface, you might want to read those events and display like, oh, here's all the games that have been created, for example. So you want to do that. Events are also used by IBC. So IBC listens. So a relayer would listen to events using WebSocket, and it would just stream the events, and it would filter that, and it would say, oh, this is an event to send a package. Oh, let me take that package and send it to the other blockchain. The same thing would happen with your user interface. You would read a WebSocket stream, and you would say, oh, here's an event that reads that a game was created, and then you would maybe display that game. To an extent, yeah. It's like an index in a classic database. I guess the metaphor works. Yeah. The reject game elements. Yeah, this is just more details on how to really manage the game. So actually, a little history. I studied game design years ago. Didn't graduate, but I had a good 2 years of fun. And what I always learned is that when you think you're done with 80% of the game, you still have another 80% to go. And you'll find that this is here the case as well, almost, because then, okay, well, we have our games, but at some point we have too many games. We have empty games that nobody wanted to play. You created one, but your friend didn't accept. So we probably need to have like a reject game sort of like mechanism. We probably want to have a deadline on this game so that when nobody's playing, it stops. We want to probably be able to bet some money, right, on the game. That would be cool. So that would be nice. So you can maybe even make some money on this, and that's generally what this whole exercise goes to. We can't do the whole thing because it's like hours and hours to get this set up properly, but it's fun and you really learn a lot. And the end goal there is that this is something that I actually tried to set up last night, but I couldn't do it in time. But what I wanted to show you was you can actually have your chain set up. You can build a relayer, like the Startport user interface allows you to build relayers. So let me actually unlock Bob here for a second. I haven't tested it here right now, so I don't know if this is going to work, but you can add a custom relayer to, for example, a certain chain. You need to connect to a particular RPC endpoint, but let's say we want to do the Cosmos Hub, for example. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work. And then, yeah, you can just, I don't know actually the RPC endpoints that we need to connect to, but you can create the RPC endpoint and you can add a relayer. I think maybe this works, connect to the Cosmos Hub, but I haven't actually tried that. Yeah, this button doesn't seem to be working. Another thing to probably ask in the Startport chat, but basically this is a relayer that can get set up for you so that, and so for those who don't know, like, you have your chain here and then you have another chain there. And they do on-chain stuff, and they create all these events and transactions and events based on that. And then in the middle sits a relayer who's just there, and it's just listening to events from both chains. And when an event says, hey, I want to transfer over this channel to that chain, it's like, oh, okay, I'll take it. And then he executes that on that chain, and then the other way around. That's the only thing a relayer really does. So you can do that. And so this relayer here on this page is just a relayer built in TypeScript. It's not not a relayer you want to use in production. Definitely not, but it works for testing. And if you want to use an actual relay, you want to look at the Hermes relay or the IBC Go relayer. Those are really good. So for those interested in IBC, have a look at that. Also, that information, is the IBC page is very limited. It just shows you how to, use a foreign token from the Atom, from the Cosmos Hub chain or Osmosis or whatever on your own chain. It doesn't really explain to you how to set up relays and stuff like that, but it does explain how relays work, and the relayer sort of like comes in for free here. And if you have any questions, and once you're here, basically at the end of the exercise, and you feel like, hey, I want to do something cool. I want to build, a leaderboard. I want to build like what's it called? A system where it selects other players automatically based on their skill set or whatever. You can do all that. And if you have any questions, just go onto the Discord for the Cosmos SDK and on the Discord for Startport if you have any questions. I'll be there answering them, if I can. And there's lots of other people as well. So that's roughly actually like where I'm at. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about how we're going to move in the future and what kind of things we're going to be adding. But for now, if anyone has any specific questions, please, I think we still have 15 minutes. So I think I just cut it a little bit short here today. But if anyone has any specific questions, feel free to ask them. Well, you want to build a certification module. Certification for what exactly? How to generate a GS client with no views? Yeah. All right. That's cool questions. All right, cool. To generate the JavaScript client with no view specific, this is possible. You would need to look into Cosm.js. Actually, we actually have a little page here. Should be here. Cosm.js. This is very limited right now. It doesn't actually, it just tells you what Startport is doing a little bit, and it goes overview. But if you just type in Cosm.js, you go to the GitHub. Basically, it's an entire library for you to interact with your chain. You can set up, build transactions, sign them, do all kinds of things, interact with Kepler, so that you can just use your Kepler wallet. But the documentation on this is a little bit sparse right now, so it's kind of tough to get started. This is actually something that we're looking to solve in 2022. So this developer portal is in progress, and one of the extra courses that we want to do is building your own front-end application. So we're thinking maybe to extend the checkers games so that you would just have a full user interface where you can see your open games and all that stuff, and it will show you how to do that with Cosm.js without any ViewPress stuff. So that would be cool. That's in the works, but if you want to look into it already, there's this. One thing that you can do, we have like a multi-sig. Let me see if I have this somewhere. Yeah. So this is a multi-sig tool in the repo. You can probably look at the code, how this has been built by Sam Panther. He has some, done a lot of like the work for Cosm.js and how to interact. So you can use this as an example of how to interact with Kepler, how to sign transactions, for example. It's on our, it's actually on Sam Pant's multi-sig page repo. But yeah, so that's the way to go about it. What's the difference between Startport and Cosm.wasm? Well, Startport is a tool to build blockchains. So what it does for you, blockchains are, modular in our case. So you would have a module to take care of transactions, a module to take care of governance, a module to take care of, in our case, the checkers game. And Startport makes it just easy for you to set that up. Startport is not a blockchain itself yet. I'm not sure. No, it isn't. It's definitely just helping you tool up and make it easier so that you don't have to go into the code like this and be like, okay, let me create a new proto file here, and then like let's make a message the archive game, and then you do all this stuff yourself, and then whatever. You don't want to do that. That's what Startport helps you. Cosm.wasm, however, is the same as basically it's a smart contract module. It's just Cosm.wasm is just one of those modules. So we just created a checkers module. Cosm.wasm is a module. It's much more complex than what we just done so far, but it creates it allows you to create smart contracts in Rust. Is a specific coding language that is very precise, very fast. And yeah, it's really cool if you want to just iterate. So for example, one chain that launched recently, Juno, is a permissionless smart contract platform, which allows you to use Cosm.wasm to just do smart contracts, just like on Ethereum. It's just a different language. Ethereum is done in Solidity mostly, and I think something else as well. I've only tried Solidity so far. But Cosm.wasm is just a different language, but kind of the same thing. At the same time, what we're also, well, we're not building it, but what is being built right now by Evmos, I'm not sure what their team name is actually, it's called Ethermint, which is just taking the Ethereum virtual machine and turning that into a module that is now part can be part of a chain. And they're currently having their testnet going, I believe. It's called EVMOS, EVMOS. And that's just, a blockchain where you can basically run, Solidity smart contracts. So that's really cool. I hope that answers your questions a little bit. And Thomas said he wants to build a certification module about power consumption and production. And you have a prototype up even. That's cool. I'll have a look at that, actually. That's cool. Nice. Yeah, these are the kind of things that blockchain are great for. This is just, I know that IXO is, interested in some of this stuff as well. It's certification, I think more, well, you should check it out. IXO's interest in certification as well, I believe. And I guess Region is maybe involved in that. I'm not actually too clear about that, but I mean, this is great. Like this transparency of like what's really happening with certain products IRL, and then displaying that using blockchain or like storing that and managing that. Great stuff. Great use for that. Absolutely. Yeah, do it, please. Reach out. And you were also saying, remember that Cosmos removes the EVM, which is a major bottleneck. What do you mean? Cosmos removes the Ethereum virtual machine, like Cosmos Hub or the Cosmos SDK or the ecosystem? Maybe you can clarify what you were saying there, Thomas. And if anyone has any other questions, right, feel free. But basically what I was saying about the EVM module is, all right. Well, what I was trying to refer to is EVMOS. EVMOS is a scalable and interoperable Ethereum platform built on proof of stake, basically, built on Tendermint with fast finality. Basically, what that means is that you can use MetaMask to interact with a chain that's running on Cosmos SDK. And that's really cool because you can get all the benefits of all the code that you can just port from Solidity straight onto your Cosmos chain. So that's really cool. And they're also building this as a separate module that you can even run it on your own chain if you want to. That requires a little bit more work. But there's a lot of cool things happening, basically. CosmWasm, EVMOS, and now Starport, that makes it super easy to just get started and build your own stuff. We really like the important key here is that we're just trying to make it easier for anyone that wants to build their own decentralized application to participate in our ecosystem. This is part of it, the developer portal. So let me tell you a little bit. There was one more question. Yeah, the wallet is decoupled from the chain. Yeah, that's right. In that sense that you can use MetaMask and you can just input a different RPC endpoint. An RPC endpoint is just your node, basically, that gives you all the data. So if you give a different endpoint, MetaMask is open to any sort of chain. And the same applies to Kepler, right? So if you have a different chain, you're running your own chain, you can suggest to Kepler, like, hey, use this data, and then Kepler knows how to talk to your chain. Yeah, so let me just wrap it up a little bit. Just wanted to say thank you all for listening and being so participative in with the questions and actually joining with the code. I know it really wasn't much. Would love to just go in a little bit deeper, but you never really know how long stuff sometimes takes. I hope this helped you, maybe got you a little excited on maybe continuing this exercise. It's a great way to get started, I think. Just want to tell you, like in the future, we'll be expanding this academy. So we're going to be creating a very large sort of like Cosm.js front end tutorial, so that if you're not interested in building your own chain, but you just want to build a nice front end for an existing chain, for example, then you can get started on that. Another thing we want to get into is more detailed CosmWasm exercises, tutorials that you can really quickly build a cool CosmWasm application. And hopefully once EVMOS is live and the Ethermint module works great and everything is tested, we'll also have an Ethermint tutorial. Let's see how that goes. This is all just still in the works. We're still sort of planning it out, but I'm looking forward to 2022 and helping B9 Lab make this, because they did great on this stuff so far. Will there be more beginner workshops? Well, I'm open to that. So maybe just in general, that's something that we can do more often. I think it's a good idea. Somebody also mentioned it to have like some more video material, code walkthroughs, basically. I'm down. Just have to see in terms of time. I got a lot of projects that I'm managing a little bit right now, and but yeah, I think it's in general like a good idea, and it's good to know that there's interest. So that's really awesome. Maybe like a YouTube live thing or something like this that we put on YouTube. Open to suggestions. You need IBC to be explained for dummies. I understand that. I also took some time when I started to really understand what was going on. Yeah, right. Vale made a good point. You can check out the Code with Us workshops. They're ongoing. Vale probably has a lot of answers for many of the questions here in terms of like what kind of support you can be giving. Yeah, and that's it for me, unless anyone has any other questions. I don't think I can do IBC in 5 minutes. I would love to be able to do that, but that's all I got. So if there's any questions, oh yeah, for sure. Thank you, Sonia. Cool. Well, everyone, thank you so much. That's it, and see you next time. All right, bye.